businessman visited his mother after 25 years and almost fainted when he saw the baby who looked just like him. Michael Anderson parked his imported car in front of the simple brick house, his hands trembling as he held the documents that needed his mother's signature. 25 years had passed since he left that neighborhood in Philadelphia, vowing never to return, but now $1 million deal depended on that deed. When he knocked on the worn wooden door, he was greeted by a woman with graying hair and a face marked by time, one he barely recognized. But what made his legs buckle wasn't the aged appearance of Margaret, his mother, but the few-month-old baby she held in her arms. The child had the same dark, expressive eyes Michael saw in the mirror, the same curve of the eyebrows, the same shape of the face. It was like looking at a miniature version of himself, 42 years ago. "Mom?" His voice came out hoarse, almost inaudible. Margaret stared at him with an expression that mixed surprise and a coldness he had never seen in her eyes before. "Michael," she murmured, adjusting the baby in her arms. "After all this time?" He remained frozen in the doorway, unable to tear his gaze away from the child calmly drinking from the bottle she held. "Whose baby is this, Mum?" he asked, still in shock. "Come inside. We're not talking on the doorstep," Margaret said, turning her back and walking into the house. Michael followed, noticing how everything seemed smaller than in his memories. The living room was clean, but the furniture was the same as decades ago, now more worn. The familiar scent of coffee and spices instantly transported him back to childhood. "Sit down," Margaret said, settling into the armchair with the baby. "I suppose you didn't come here out of longing." The hardness in her voice surprised him. His memories held a loving mother, always ready to hug him when he came home from school. "I need your signature on some documents," Michael began, but his eyes remained fixed on the child. "Mom, you didn't answer. Whose baby is this?" Margaret took a deep breath before responding. "He showed up at my door 3 months ago. One Sunday morning, when I got back from Mass, he was here in a basket with a note saying only that I'd know what to do." "That's impossible," Michael said, standing abruptly. "No one just abandons a baby like that, out of nowhere. You must have called the authorities. You must have what?" Margaret's voice carried a bitterness he had never heard before. "Hand this child over to become just another number in the system, like you did to me when you decided this house wasn't good enough?" The comparison hit him like a punch to the gut. Michael sat back down, running his hands through his perfectly combed hair. "Mom, I didn't abandon you. I went to study, to build a career. I sent money every month for years." "Money," she repeated with disdain. "And you thought that replaced your presence? Your calls became fewer and farther between. Your visits turned into empty promises. The last time we spoke was 10 years ago, when you called to say you were getting married." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, back to the story. Michael vaguely remembered that quick call, made more out of social obligation than a genuine desire to share his happiness. "And your marriage? How did that go?" Margaret asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "We ended it 5 years ago," Michael admitted, lowering his head. "Children?" "No. Melissa didn't want any. Said it would interfere with our careers." The baby began to squirm restlessly in Margaret's arms, making little noises. She stood up and began rocking him gently, humming a lullaby that Michael remembered from his own childhood. "So you came here after 25 years because you need my signature," she said, never stopping the swaying motion. "For what exactly?" Michael pulled the papers from his leather briefcase. "The land my father left. There's a company interested in building a shopping center. The amount is significant, Mom. It could change your life." Margaret stopped moving and looked him straight in the eye. "And yours too, I imagine. What's your cut in this deal?" The question caught him off guard. His mother had always been sharp, but he didn't expect her to be so direct about money. I'm the broker handling the transaction. Yes? There's a commission involved. So you didn't come here to see me. You came to make money." The accusation hung in the air between them like a verdict. Michael wanted to deny it, but he knew it would be a lie. Truthfully, if it weren't for the deal, They'd probably go another 25 years without seeing each other. The baby started crying, a sharp wail that filled the awkward silence. "He's hungry again," said Margaret. "Can you go prepare the bottle? The instructions are in the kitchen." "Me? Mom, I don't know how to—" "Then it's time you learned," she replied, handing him the baby before he could protest. Michael suddenly found himself holding an infant, completely lost. The child was heavier than he'd imagined, and the crying didn't let up. Instinctively, he began rocking the baby the way he'd seen his mother do. "Shh, it's okay," he murmured, surprised at how naturally the words came. In the kitchen, he found a small table with cans of formula, sterilized bottles, and a handwritten note with instructions. As he prepared the bottle, struggling to hold the baby and stir the pot at the same time, he noticed the state of the fridge. There was hardly any food, just a few eggs, a piece of cheese, some milk, and not much else. The nearly empty shelves contrasted sharply with the abundance he was used to in his own life. When he returned to the living room with the bottle ready, he found his mother staring out the window. "Neighbor Ruth must be wondering who the man in a suit is in my house," Margaret remarked without turning around. "You didn't tell the neighbors about me?" What was I supposed to say? That my son became too important to visit his own mother? Michael tested the milk's temperature on his wrist, like he'd seen in movies, and offered the bottle to the baby. To his surprise, the child stopped crying immediately and began drinking eagerly. "How do you know how to take care of a baby?" Margaret asked, finally turning to face him. "I don't. It just happened." She watched him for a moment, and for the first time since he'd arrived, Michael saw a flicker of the loving mother he'd once known. "What's his name?" Michael asked, looking down at the baby. "Jacob. It was your grandfather's name, remember?" Michael did remember. His maternal grandfather had been one of the most important figures of his childhood, always telling stories and teaching him about honesty and hard work. Ironically, values he felt he'd lost along the way. "Mom, we need to talk about what to do with him. You can't just keep an abandoned baby. There are legal procedures." "Procedures," she laughed bitterly. "Like the procedures you followed to build your new life, forgetting where you came from? That's not fair." "Fair?" Margaret stepped closer. "You want to talk about what's fair? I raised you alone after your father left us. I worked double shifts so you could go to the best schools. And when you finally got what you wanted, you forgot me like I never existed." Michael knew she was right, but admitting it would mean confronting years of justifications he'd built for himself. "I didn't forget you, Mum. Just, life got complicated. The company, the commitments." "Commitments," she repeated. "And wasn't I a commitment? Didn't your own mother deserve even a visit at Christmas?" The baby had finished nursing and now looked at him with those curious, attentive eyes. Michael felt something strange stirring in his chest, a sensation he hadn't experienced in a long time. "He really does look a lot like me," he murmured. "Yes. From the very first day, that was the first thing I noticed. It's like he's my son." Michael finished the sentence and immediately regretted saying it out loud. Margaret stared at him intently. "Do you have something to tell me, Michael?" "No. I mean, not that I know of. I've always been careful, always..." "Always what?" Michael realized he was treading dangerous ground. His personal life wasn't something he usually discussed, especially not with his mother. "Mom, if he were my son, I'd know. The mother would have come looking for me, especially if she knew who I was." "And who exactly are you?" Margaret asked. "Besides a man who abandons his own family when they're no longer convenient." The words cut like knives. Michael handed the baby back to his mother and stood up, walking to the window. Outside, he saw children playing in the street, something he himself had done on that same sidewalk decades ago. "I didn't abandon you," he said, but the conviction in his voice was weak. "No? Then what do you call 25 years without a visit?" "I was building my life, and I wasn't part of it." The silence that followed was heavy, laden with years of unresolved hurt. The baby had fallen asleep in Margaret's arms, oblivious to the tension in the room. "About the land," Michael said, trying to steer the conversation back. "Ah, yes. The land. Do you know I've had other offers over the years?" "Other offers?" Yes, several. I always refused. Why? Margaret looked at him as if the answer were obvious. Because that land is all that's left of your father. It's the only thing I can leave you when I'm gone. The revelation hit him like lightning. All these years, while he'd built his fortune and distanced himself from his family, his mother had protected the only inheritance she could give him. Mum, I didn't know. Of course you didn't. How could you? You never asked about my life. Michael felt the weight of guilt settling on his shoulders. He'd spent years justifying his absence with the need for professional focus, but the truth was simpler and more painful. He'd been ashamed of his roots and had chosen to ignore them. How much are they offering? Margaret asked. $2.5 million. She let out a low whistle. That's a lot of money. It is. You could leave here, buy a better house, live comfortably. And how much would you get? Michael hesitated. $100,000. So you came all this way for $100,000? It's not just that, Mom. No? Then explain what else it is. Michael didn't know how to answer. Truly, the money had been his only motivation. He hadn't even thought about his mother's well-being beyond the financial aspect. The baby stirred and made a small noise, still asleep. Margaret gently stroked his head. He's such a good baby, she said. Sleeps through the night, hardly ever cries. It's like he knows he has to be strong. Mom, you can't keep him. It's illegal. And besides, you're 68. Raising a baby is too much work. Are you calling me old? No, I'm being practical. You need to think about what's best for the child. And what would be best, putting him in an orphanage, handing him over to strangers? There are families who want to adopt. Families like yours? Who'll abandon him when he's no longer convenient? The jab was cruel, but Michael knew there was truth in it. His own inability to maintain lasting relationships was proof enough. I didn't abandon you, he insisted, but now the words sounded hollow even to himself. Oh, really? When was the last time you asked about my health? When was the last time you cared to know if I was okay, if I needed anything? Michael Anderson tried to remember but realized he couldn't. His interactions with his mother in recent years had boiled down to occasional bank transfers and generic Christmas cards. I always assumed you were fine, because it was easier to believe that than to actually check. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, back to the story. The front door opened and an elderly woman walked in unannounced, carrying a grocery bag. Margaret, I brought the vegetables you asked for. She stopped when she saw Michael. Oh, sorry, I didn't know you had company. Ruth, this is my son, Michael, said Margaret in a neutral tone. Ruth looked him up and down, clearly noting the expensive suit and city demeanor. The son she talks about so much? Ruth asked, but there was something in her tone that suggested Margaret's words weren't all praise. Nice to meet you, Michael said, standing to greet her. Ruth shook his hand with surprising strength for someone her age. So you finally showed up, she remarked, not bothering to hide her disapproval. Ruth, Margaret began. No, Margaret. You might be too polite to say it, but I'm not. She turned to Michael. Your mother cried many Christmases waiting for a call from you, cried many birthdays hoping for a visit, and now here you are, all dressed up when you need something. Michael felt like a child being scolded by a teacher. I didn't know that. Of course you didn't. How would you? You were too busy being too important to remember who raised you. Ruth, please, Margaret said, but Michael could see his mother wasn't truly bothered by her neighbor's defense. And this beautiful baby, Ruth said, moving closer to Jacob. Just like you when you were little, isn't he, Margaret? Yes. The spitting image. It's really quite a striking coincidence, Ruth commented, but there was something in her tone that suggested she didn't believe in coincidences. Michael realized both women were studying him, as if they knew something he didn't. You think that... He started, but couldn't finish. Think what? Ruth asked, raising an eyebrow. Nothing, forget it. Ruth was the one who helped me when I found Jacob, Margaret said. She was here when we discovered the basket at the door. What time in the morning was that? Michael asked. Early. I always wake up at 5 for the 6 o'clock mass. When I opened the door, he was there, sleeping like an angel. And no one saw who left him? No, but Ruth spotted a young woman hanging around here a few days before. A young woman? Michael felt his heart speed up. Yes, young, pretty, long dark hair. She kept staring at the house from a distance like she was studying the place. Did you talk to her? I tried, Ruth said. But as soon as I got close, she ran off. Michael began to feel a strange twist in his gut. There was something familiar about the description, but he couldn't quite place it. Was she from this neighborhood? No, I know everyone around here. She was an outsider. And you think she's the one who left the baby? Who else would it be? Margaret said. The basket was brand new, expensive, and Jacob's clothes too. Whoever left him knew he'd be well cared for. But why here? Why with you? Margaret and Ruth exchanged a meaningful glance. Maybe because this person knew I'd raised a child alone before, said Margaret, looking straight at Michael. The implication was clear. If someone had researched where to leave the baby, they would have discovered Margaret was Michael's mother. And if someone wanted the child to be raised by someone related to him. This is crazy, said Michael, more to himself than to the women. Really? Asked Ruth. Are you absolutely certain you don't have any children out there? Of course I'm sure. But even as he said it, Michael felt doubts growing in his mind. He'd had relationships over the years, some serious, others casual. He'd always been careful, but... How old did you say the baby is? He asked. About 3 months, Margaret replied. Michael did the math 9 months ago. He tried to remember what was happening in his life back then. He'd just ended a difficult relationship with a co-worker and then... I need to go, he said abruptly, standing up. Go? Margaret looked surprised. But you just got here. I have an important meeting, but I'll come back tomorrow. We can talk more about the documents. Of course, said Margaret, but disappointment tinged her voice. The documents. Michael quickly kissed his mother's forehead and left the house without properly saying goodbye to Ruth. He needed fresh air. He needed to think. In the car, he turned the AC to max and sat for a few minutes, trying to sort through his thoughts. The resemblance between him and the baby was undeniable, and 9 months ago, he pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts. There were several women he'd dated in the last 2 years, but one in particular made his stomach tighten when he thought of her. Rebecca. They'd had an intense but brief relationship. She was young, ambitious, and had shown a lot of interest in his financial situation. It had ended abruptly when she started asking about marriage and kids. He dialed a few times, but her phone was out of service. He tried to remember where she worked, where she lived, but realized he knew surprisingly little about her personal life. He drove back to his apartment in downtown Philadelphia, but the whole way, the image of the baby wouldn't leave his mind. Those eyes just like his, the way it had stopped crying when he held it. At home, he went straight to his laptop and started searching for Rebecca on social media. Her profile was private, but in public photos, there was no sign of a recent pregnancy. He tried to recall the last time he'd seen her. It had been at a work party about a year ago. She'd tried to talk to him, but he'd been with Melissa at the time, his ex-wife, and had avoided contact. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. Michael. It was his assistant's voice. Are you okay? You missed the meeting with the Japanese investors. Michael checked the clock. It was almost 5 in the afternoon. He'd missed one of the most important meetings of the month. Sorry, Jennifer. I had a family emergency. Can you reschedule for tomorrow? They already went back to the hotel. They said they'll reach out if they're still interested. Michael closed his eyes. That deal represented months of work and a significant commission. I'll try to talk to them tomorrow. Anything else? Your mother called. My mother? Michael was surprised. When? An hour ago. Said it was urgent. Left a number. Michael wrote it down, a landline he didn't recognize, and hung up. Why would his mother call his office? She didn't even know where he worked. He dialed quickly. Hello? It was Ruth's voice. It's Michael. Did my mother call? She's at the hospital, Ruth said bluntly. The world seemed to stop around him. Hospital? What happened? The baby started running a very high fever. His mother panicked, and I called a neighbor to take them. They're at Mercy Medical Center. Michael was already grabbing his car keys before Ruth even finished speaking. How are they? I don't know. His mother asked me to call you and said it was urgent. I'm on my way. The rush hour traffic in Philadelphia was heavy, but Michael drove as if his life depended on it. The whole way there, he couldn't stop thinking the worst. What if the baby was seriously ill? What if his mother couldn't handle the situation? He reached the hospital in record time and rushed to the emergency room. He found his mother sitting in a plastic chair, holding Jacob in her arms. She looked like she had aged 10 years in just a few hours. "Mom," he called out as he hurried over. "How is he?" "The doctor said it's just an ear infection, common in babies, but the fever spiked so fast and I was terrified," said Margaret, tears in her eyes. Michael sat beside her and, without a second thought, wrapped his arm around her shoulders. It was the first time in decades they'd had any physical contact. "Everything's okay now," he said, surprised by how natural the gesture felt. I didn't know what to do. He was crying so much, and the fever wouldn't go down. If it weren't for Ruth... You did the right thing bringing him here. Jacob slept restlessly in Margaret's arms, still flushed from the fever. "The doctor wants to see him," Margaret said. "Run some routine tests, since he doesn't have a medical history." "Makes sense. Where is he?" "Exam room 3, but Michael... There's something I need to tell you." Something in his mother's tone made Michael brace for the worst. "What?" "When we were in triage, a young woman showed up. The same one Ruth saw lurking around the house. She was across the hallway watching us." Michael's heart raced. "And then, I went to talk to her. I asked if she knew Jacob. What did she say?" "She started crying. Said she just wanted to make sure he was okay. When I asked who she was, she ran off." "Is she still here?" "I don't know. That's when the doctor called us in." Michael stood immediately. "Stay here with him. I'll look for her." "Michael, wait." But he was already striding down the hospital corridors, searching for a young woman with dark hair who might be Rebecca. He checked the cafeteria, the lobby benches, even the parking lot, but she was nowhere to be found. When he returned, he found his mother speaking with a young doctor. "This is my son," Margaret introduced. "Dr. Henry," the doctor said, extending his hand. "The baby's fine. The infection is easily treated with antibiotics, but I'd like to run some more detailed tests." "What kind of tests?" Michael asked. "Blood work to check for any nutritional deficiencies, a hearing test, just some basics. And we also need to sort out his legal status." "Legal status? Have you started the adoption process? Or temporary guardianship?" Michael and Margaret exchanged glances. "Actually," Margaret began. "He showed up at my mother's door 3 months ago," Michael explained. "We still don't know who his biological parents are." The doctor looked concerned. "Have you reported this to the proper authorities? There are legal procedures for cases like this." "Not yet," Margaret admitted. "I didn't know what to do." "I'll have to contact the hospital's social services," Dr. Henry said. "It's protocol in situations like this." Michael felt panic rising. If the authorities got involved, Jacob would be taken from his mother and placed in the system. And he had a growing suspicion there was much more to this story than met the eye. "Doctor, how long do we have before that happens?" he asked. "Well, considering it's the end of the workday on a Friday, I probably won't be able to talk to anyone until Monday. But don't delay. This situation needs to be resolved quickly." When the doctor walked away, Michael sat down heavily beside his mother. "They're going to take him from me," said Margaret, her voice choked. "No, they won't," said Michael, though he wasn't convinced himself. "How can you be so sure?" Michael looked at the baby, who was now sleeping peacefully after the medication. "Because I'm going to find out who his biological parents are before Monday." "And how will you do that?" "I have a few suspicions." Margaret studied him carefully. "You think he could be your grandson?" Michael finished. "I'm starting to think so." The revelation hung between them like a bomb about to explode. "If it's true," Margaret began, "if it's true, then someone wanted you to know." Someone looked into me, found out who my mother was, and deliberately left my son on your doorstep. But why? Why not just talk to you directly? Michael considered the possibilities. Maybe the birth mother knew about his resistance to family commitments. Maybe she thought he'd reject the child, or maybe she wanted me to come here, to find you again. The theory sounded strange even to him, but there was a disturbing logic to it. That would be very elaborate, said Margaret, or very desperate. They sat in silence for a few minutes, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Michael stood up. Let's go home. I need to make some calls. Calls to people who can help me find the truth. The drive back was quieter. Jacob slept in the infant carrier the hospital had lent them, and Margaret sat in the passenger seat, clearly exhausted from the day's tension. Michael, she said as they neared home. Yeah? No matter what we find out about Jacob, I'm glad you came back. Those simple words carried the weight of decades of hurt and hope. Michael felt an emotion he hadn't experienced in a long time. Me too, Mum. Me too. When they got home, Ruth was waiting at the door with a pot in her hands. I made stew, she said. I figured you wouldn't have time to cook. The simple gesture of community care was a stark contrast to the cold corporate world Michael was used to. Thank you, Ruth, he said, genuinely touched. So, how's the baby? Better. Just an ear infection, Margaret explained. Thank goodness. And what about that girl who showed up at the hospital? Michael turned quickly to Ruth. You heard about the girl. Margaret called me from the hospital, said the same person who'd been lurking around the house showed up there. Ruth, I need your help with something, Michael said. Can you remember any more details about this girl? Height, age, what she was wearing? Ruth thought for a moment. Young, early 20s. Thin, long, dark hair. Always wore dark clothes when I saw her. And she had a tattoo on her wrist. A tattoo? Michael's heart raced. What did it look like? Small, looked like a little bird. Michael remembered immediately. Rebecca had that exact tattoo, a tiny hummingbird on her left wrist. I need to make some calls, he said, heading inside. In the room that had been his as a teenager, now converted into storage, Michael tried calling Rebecca one more time, still out of range. Then he tried an old mutual friend, Brian, who worked at the same company as Rebecca. Michael, long time, said Brian. How are you? I'm good, Brian. Listen, I need some info. Do you know how to get in touch with Rebecca Wilson? Rebecca? Man, she doesn't work here anymore. She left about 6 months ago. Left? For where? I'm not sure. She said she was going to take care of personal matters. But why do you want to talk to her? Didn't something happen between you two a while back? It's complicated. Do you have any way to reach her? I have her sister's phone number. Maybe she knows where Rebecca is. Michael wrote down the number and called immediately. Hello? A young woman's voice answered. Hi, my name is Michael Anderson. I'm looking for your sister, Rebecca. There was a long pause on the other end. Rebecca, she doesn't want to talk to you. It's urgent. About a child. Jacob. The word slipped out before she could stop herself. Michael felt his blood run cold. You know about Jacob. I can't talk about this over the phone. Please, I need to understand what's going on. Rebecca is staying at a hotel near the hospital, Central Park Inn, room 237, but she doesn't want to see you. Why not? Because she's afraid of you. The line went silent after that. Michael tried calling back, but no one answered. He went downstairs to the living room where he found his mother feeding Jacob again. I found out something, he said. What? The woman who's been lurking around the house. I think I know who she is and where to find her. Margaret stopped feeding the baby. And? She's staying at a hotel near the hospital. I'm going to talk to her. Michael, it's dangerous to go alone. What if it's a trap? Mom, if this baby is my son, I need to know the truth. And if he's not, I need to know why someone wants me to believe he is. Then I'm coming with you. No, you stay here with Jacob. If something goes wrong, at least he'll be safe. Margaret nodded reluctantly. Be careful. Michael drove to the Central Park Inn with his heart pounding. The place was simple, clean, the kind of establishment that catered to budget-conscious business travelers. At the front desk, he asked for room 237. "The young lady is in. Would you like me to call and announce you?" "No, thank you. It's a surprise." He took the stairs, mentally rehearsing what he would say. He knocked gently on the door. "Who is it?" A woman's voice came from inside. "Rebecca. It's me, Michael." There was a long silence, then the sound of chains being undone. The door opened just a crack, and he saw a face he recognized, thinner with deep circles under her eyes, but definitely Rebecca. "How did you find me?" she asked. "Your sister told me where you were." "Amanda shouldn't have." "Rebecca, we need to talk. About Jacob." Her eyes filled with tears instantly. "I didn't want it to be like this," she said, opening the door fully. The room was small but tidy. There were a few clothes scattered around and photos on the bed. Michael stepped closer and saw they were pictures of a baby. "Jacob. You've been watching him," he said, not a question. "Every day," Rebecca admitted. "I needed to make sure he was being cared for." "Why didn't you come talk to me directly?" Rebecca sat on the edge of the bed, looking smaller and more fragile than he remembered. "Because I know how you are with commitments. Remember how our relationship ended?" Michael did. She had brought up marriage and children, and he had immediately pulled back, saying he wasn't ready for that kind of responsibility. "When did you find out you were pregnant?" 2 weeks after we broke up. I tried calling you so many times, but your assistant always said you were busy. I sent emails, you never replied. I never got any emails from you. Of course not. Your life was too neatly arranged to include complications like an ex-girlfriend with a baby. The accusation was harsh, but Michael knew there was truth in it. He had indeed instructed Jennifer to filter out unnecessary contacts. Why didn't you push harder? Push how? By showing up at your office, causing a scene. You always made it clear that you valued your professional image above all else. Michael sat in the only chair in the room. "So you had the baby alone?" "Yes, I worked until I couldn't anymore. Used up all my savings. When Jacob was born, I realized I couldn't take care of him by myself." "Why didn't you come to me then?" "Because I knew you too well. You'd have offered money to make the problem disappear, suggested adoption, anything but taking responsibility." The words hit like a slap in the face, especially because Michael knew she was right. "So you researched my family. I spent months digging into your life, found out about your mother, how she raised you alone. I thought maybe she'd have more heart than you. And it worked. Your mother is an incredible woman. She welcomed Jacob like he was a divine gift, cares for him with so much love. But you're still his mother." Rebecca started crying. "I know, and it kills me every day, but I can't take care of him. I lost my job when I got pregnant, spent everything on the birth and the first few months. My family won't support me." "Why didn't you tell me the truth when I showed up at my mom's house?" "Because I was testing you. I wanted to see if meeting your son would spark any paternal instinct, if you'd show real interest." "And the verdict?" "You asked about legal procedures, talked about handing him over to the authorities. Exactly what I expected." Michael stood and walked to the window. Below, the city life carried on as usual, while his own life crumbled and rebuilt itself at once. "What do you want now?" he asked. "I want Jacob to have a real family, to be raised with love and stability." "By my mother." "Your mother is 68, Michael. She won't be able to care for a child into adulthood. So what's the solution?" Rebecca got up and went to the photos on the bed. "These are all the pictures I have of him. I sneak a few when I visit." She picked one up. "Look how he smiles at your mum. See how they've bonded." In the photo, Jacob was in Margaret's arms, both grinning. The joy on their faces was undeniable. "Rebecca, you're his mother. He needs you. He needs stability. And you can give that to him. I don't know how to be a father. No one does at first, but you have resources. You can hire help, make sure he gets an education, healthcare, And you? What happens to you in all this? I disappear from his life. It's better that way. That's insane. A child needs his mother. Not if the mother can't care for him properly. Michael turned to face her. What if I said we'd find a way to make this work? All of us together. How? I don't know yet, but there has to be a way. Rebecca shook her head. You don't understand. It's not just money. I'm not emotionally strong enough to be a mother right now. The pregnancy was hard, the birth was traumatic, and after, I fell into deep depression. Did you get treatment? I can't afford a therapist. Medication is expensive. Michael realized the situation was far more complicated than he'd thought. Rebecca, leaving a child on someone's doorstep doesn't fix depression. It does for me. Knowing he's loved and cared for is the only thing that gives me peace. But come Monday, the authorities will get involved. Social services will want to know who the biological parents are. Rebecca paled. What are you saying? The doctor at Mercy Medical Center said it's protocol. Since Jacob has no documentation, they'll investigate. And if they find out it's me, they'll want to know why you abandoned him, might even press charges. Rebecca sat back down, looking even more fragile. I can't go to jail. I have no one, no money for a lawyer. It won't come to that, but we need to find a legal solution to this situation. How? Michael thought quickly. There were a few options, but all of them involved officially acknowledging that Jacob was his son. You'd have to give me custody of him, officially. And then? Then we'll figure out the rest. But at least he'd be legally protected. Would your mother agree to this? I think so. She's attached to Jacob, but she also wants what's best for him. Rebecca stayed silent for a long time. I need to think. Rebecca, we don't have much time. It's Friday night. Monday morning, the hospital will call social services. I know. It's just... She started crying again. It's so hard to accept that I failed as a mother before I even began. You didn't fail. You did what you thought was best for your son. That says a lot about you as a mother. Really? Really. And we're not giving up on you. We're trying to find a way to keep the family together. Family? She repeated the word as if it were foreign. It's been so long since I felt like part of a family. Well, now you're part of ours, like it or not. For the first time since she'd entered the room, Rebecca smiled. Does your mother know you're here? She does, and she's taking care of Jacob. How is he, after the fever? Better. The doctor said it's just a minor infection. I was so worried. I saw you arriving at the hospital and almost ran after the ambulance. Why didn't you approach us sooner? Fear. Fear of being judged. Fear of having to explain everything. Fear of having to take Jacob back with me. And now I think I'm ready to face all of it. Michael felt relieved. Finally, there was progress. Rebecca, there's one more thing I need to ask you. What? Why did you specifically choose my mother? Why not a charity or a family who wanted to adopt? Rebecca picked up one of Jacob's photos. Because when I researched your family, I found out your mother raised you alone. I read in an old interview, when you received a business award, that you said you owed everything to your mother. I thought someone who raised a child alone and saw them become successful would know how to take care of Jacob. But I'm not a successful son, Michael said honestly. What do you mean? I haven't seen my mother in 25 years. She raised a son who abandoned her as soon as he got rich. Rebecca studied him carefully. But you're here now, only because I needed her signature for a business deal. No, you may have come for that, but you stayed for Jacob, and for your mother. Michael realized she was right. The real estate deal had become secondary since he'd seen the baby. How can you be so sure? Because a man who only cares about money would have taken the signed documents and left. He wouldn't have spent the whole day worried about a baby who might not even be his. The observation was sharp. Michael had truly surprised himself with his own reaction. Are you coming back with us? He asked. Where to? To my mother's house, today, now. don't know if I'm ready. Rebecca, if we're going to fix this, it has to be together. Jacob needs to see both of you, his two mothers, working together for his sake. Two mothers? You carried him for 9 months and gave him life. My mother took him in and cared for him. You're both his mothers, in different ways, but you are. Rebecca started crying again, but this time, they seemed like tears of relief. No one's ever said that to me before. They should have. You made the hardest decision a mother can make. You put your child's well-being above your own desires. And you? Do you want to be his father? The question caught Michael off guard. All day long, he had been focused on solving the legal problem and uncovering the truth. He hadn't really stopped to think about what he wanted. I'm learning to want, he said honestly. When I held him in my arms today, for the first time in decades, I felt there was something more important than work. It's scary, isn't it? Terrifying, but also special? Very special. Rebecca stood up and began packing her few belongings into a backpack. Let's go before I lose my nerve. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps those of us just starting out. Now, back to it. The ride back to Margaret's house was quiet. Rebecca sat in the passenger seat, nervous, constantly fidgeting with the backpack strap. Your mother is going to hate me, she said as they neared the house. Why? For abandoning her grandson, for deceiving you all. My mother has spent her whole life caring for people. She'll understand. How can you be sure? Because I know her, and because she taught me that family isn't about perfection. It's about being there when it counts. When they arrived, the lights were on, and soft music could be heard from inside. Michael knocked gently on the door. Margaret opened it, holding Jacob in her arms, and her expression shifted from surprise to understanding when she saw Rebecca. Come in, dear, she said, as if she'd been waiting for this moment for weeks. Rebecca hesitated on the doorstep. Mrs. Margaret, I need to explain. Explain what? That you're Jacob's mother. I already knew that. You knew? A woman recognizes when another woman is grieving for her child. You have the eyes of a mother who had to make an impossible choice. Rebecca broke down in tears right there in the doorway. Margaret handed Jacob to Michael and hugged the young woman. It's all right, my dear. It's all right. I'm so sorry, Rebecca sobbed. I couldn't take care of him alone, and I was afraid Michael would... Shh, Margaret led her to the sofa. You did what any mother would do. You made sure your son was safe and loved. Michael watched the scene, gently rocking Jacob. The baby stared at him with curious eyes as if trying to understand the situation. What now? Asked Rebecca, wiping her tears. Now we'll make things right, said Margaret. No more secrets, no more fear. The authorities will get involved on Monday, Michael explained. So we need a plan by then, said Margaret, as pragmatic as ever. What kind of plan? Rebecca needs medical support for her depression. Michael needs to legally establish paternity, and I want to keep being Jacob's grandmother. But how do we make that work? Asked Rebecca. Together, said a voice from the door. It was Ruth, walking in with a tray of coffee. Sorry to intrude, but the walls are thin, and I heard everything. Ruth, Margaret began. No, let me speak. You're making something simple complicated, she said, setting the tray down. Rebecca, where are you living now? Nowhere. I was at the hotel, but... Then stay here. Margaret has had empty rooms for decades. Michael, where do you live? In an apartment downtown. Sell it and move here too, she said, as if it were obvious. Ruth, it's not that simple, said Michael. Why not? You have money. Your mother has space, Rebecca needs support, and Jacob needs all of you. What's the complicated part? The silence that followed was telling. Really, when put simply, the solution seemed obvious. I can't just give up my career, said Michael. Who said anything about giving up? Work from home. In today's world, it's possible. And Rebecca? Asked Margaret. Rebecca will get treatment, she'll recover, and she'll learn to be a mother with you teaching her. And when she's ready, she can decide what she wants to do professionally. That would be amazing, said Rebecca hesitantly, but I can't accept charity. It's not charity, said Margaret. It's family taking care of family. But I'd cost money, food, treatment. Rebecca, interrupted Michael, you gave me a son. Do you think there's any way I could repay that financially? It wasn't a gift. It was a mistake that... It wasn't a mistake, Margaret said firmly. Jacob is the best thing that's happened in this house in decades. He brought life, he brought the two of you back to me. Are you sure? Asked Rebecca. I am, and you know why? Because I spent 25 years taking care of an empty house, pretending I didn't miss having family around. Jacob showed me what I was missing. Michael felt a wave of guilt, but also of hope. Mom, if I move here, things will be different. I'll have to work from home. I'll have video calls. So what? The house is big. We can turn one of the rooms into an office. And my clients, they'll find the change strange. The ones who matter will understand. The others, well, maybe they're not that important. Rebecca, who had been listening silently, finally spoke. Are you sure you want this? You want me to be part of your family? Rebecca, said Margaret, you already are. From the moment you left Jacob at my door, you became my daughter too. The words moved everyone deeply. Jacob, as if sensing the emotion in the room, began making happy little noises. He's happy, Michael observed. He feels we're all together, said Margaret. Babies sense these things. So, should we try? Asked Rebecca. We should, said Michael, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. We should, agreed Margaret. Great, said Ruth, clapping her hands. Now about Monday and social services. What about them? Asked Michael. You'll show up at the hospital as a family. Michael will officially claim paternity. Rebecca will explain the situation, and Margaret will be there as the grandmother supporting everyone. It's that simple. It's that simple. You have a place to live, financial stability, family support. What more could social services want? But what if they ask why Rebecca left Jacob here? Rebecca will tell the truth, that she was suffering from postpartum depression, that she had no support, and that she made a difficult decision to protect her son. But now things have changed. How have they changed? Now she has a family to support her. She has access to medical treatment. She has a safe place for her and the baby. And if they don't accept it? They will, said Margaret with conviction, because we'll show them Jacob is loved and cared for, and that we're all committed to his well-being. Michael looked at the baby in his arms. Jacob had fallen asleep during the conversation, peaceful and trusting. You know what? He said. I think this will work. Why? Asked Rebecca. Because for the first time in a long time, I'm doing something out of love instead of obligation or ambition. And how does that feel? Asked Margaret. Scary, but whole. Like a part of me that's been missing for years is finally back in place. Rebecca stepped closer and gently touched Jacob's hand. Can I hold him? Of course. Michael handed the baby to her. Seeing Rebecca with Jacob in her arms was different from seeing her as a stranger at the hospital. Now he could see the connection between them, the complicated but real love of a mother for her son. Hi, Jacob, Rebecca whispered. It's me. Your mommy. And this will be our new home, with Grandma Margaret and Daddy Michael. The baby opened his eyes and stared at her, as if recognizing her. He knows who you are, said Margaret, moved. I used to sing to him when I was pregnant, admitted Rebecca. Maybe he remembers. Sing now, requested Michael. Rebecca hesitated, but then began to hum a soft lullaby. Jacob watched her intently, and gradually his eyes closed again. It's beautiful, murmured Margaret. It's our family, said Michael. And for the first time in decades, the word family didn't scare him. The weekend passed like a dream. Saturday and Sunday were spent organizing the new life they had decided to build together. Michael called his secretary and cancelled all his appointments for the following week, explaining there was a family emergency. Rebecca, with Margaret's help, arranged the room that would be hers, the same one Michael had as a teenager. They found old photos in the dresser, images of a young Michael that surprised Rebecca. "You look just like Jacob," she remarked, showing a photo to Margaret. "He did. Just as stubborn, too." "Hey," protested Michael from the living room, where he was assembling a new crib he'd bought that morning. The ease with which they adapted to the routine of caring for Jacob together amazed everyone. Each naturally took on certain responsibilities. Margaret was an expert at getting the baby to stop crying, Rebecca knew his food preferences, and Michael discovered he had a knack for bath time. During meals, they talked about practical plans. Michael consulted specialists in postpartum depression for Rebecca. Margaret suggested changes to the house to make it more baby-friendly. Rebecca shyly expressed interest in going back to school once she felt better. "What would you like to study?" asked Michael. "I've always wanted to be a nurse, but I never had the means." "Now you do," said Margaret, "and it would be perfect. A nurse in the family is always useful." "Are you both sure you want to invest in me like this?" "Rebecca," said Michael, "you're the mother of my son. Investing in you is investing in his future too." On Sunday evening, while Rebecca and Margaret prepared for Monday's hospital visit, Michael was alone with Jacob for the first time for an extended period. The baby was awake, curiously watching the ceiling. Michael started talking to him about random things, about work, about how he was feeling, about the fear and excitement of their new life. "You know, Jacob," he said, "I never thought I'd be a father. I always believed I didn't know how to love someone enough to take on that responsibility. But you changed everything." Jacob seemed to pay attention, as if he understood. "I promise I'll be a better father than I was a son. I promise I'll never abandon you like I did my mother. And I promise we'll be a real family." "We already are," said Rebecca, appearing in the doorway. "Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt." "You didn't. I was just talking to him. He likes when you talk to him. I can see it in his eyes." "Rebecca, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you regret it, leaving him here?" Rebecca thought for a moment. "I regret not talking to you sooner. I regret suffering alone during the pregnancy, but leaving him here, no, it was the best decision I ever made." "Why?" "Because it brought you back into each other's lives. Your mother was alone, you were empty, and I was lost. Jacob brought us together. How can someone so small have so much power? I think love has that power. Love changes everything." Monday arrived with a mix of nerves and determination. The three adults dressed carefully, Michael in a suit, though more casual than usual, Rebecca in a simple yet elegant dress borrowed from Margaret, and Margaret in her best formal attire. Jacob was unusually calm, as if sensing the importance of the day. At the hospital, they were directed to a room where a social worker, Dr. Henry, and a psychologist specializing in child abandonment cases were waiting. "Good morning," said the social worker, a middle-aged woman named Susan. "I understand you have information about this child's situation." "Yes," Michael replied. "Jacob is my son. This is Rebecca, his birth mother, and this is my mother, Margaret. Can you explain the circumstances that led to the child being in informal care?" Rebecca took a deep breath and began telling her story. She spoke about the difficult pregnancy, her attempts to contact Michael, her postpartum depression, and finally her decision to leave Jacob with Margaret. "And why specifically with you?" Susan asked Margaret. "Because Rebecca did her research and knew I had raised a child alone. She thought I would know how to care for Jacob. And you, Mr. Anderson, weren't aware of the child's existence?" "No. Rebecca tried to contact me during the pregnancy, but He hesitated. "I was too focused on my career and ended up missing her attempts to reach me." "And now? What's your plan?" "We want to formalize the situation," Michael said. "I'll legally establish paternity. Rebecca will receive medical support to treat her postpartum depression, and we'll all live together so Jacob can have a stable family." The psychologist, who had remained quiet until then, spoke up. "Rebecca, how do you feel about this decision?" "Scared," Rebecca admitted, "but also hopeful. For the first time since Jacob was born, I feel like I can be a good mother to him. What changed? Now I have support. I'm not alone, and I'll get treatment for my emotional struggles. And you? The psychologist turned to Michael and Margaret. How do you feel about integrating Rebecca into the family? Rebecca is my grandson's mother, Margaret said. She's already part of the family. I want to learn how to be a father, Michael added, and I want Jacob to grow up knowing his real mother, not just knowing he was adopted. Dr. Henry, who had been examining Jacob during the conversation, spoke up. Medically, the child is in perfect health and clearly well cared for. The transition in care has been exemplary. Susan made a few notes before looking at them. Normally, cases like this are more complicated, but you've already shown you can care for the child. There's an established emotional bond, and there's a clear plan for the future. Does that mean, Rebecca began? It means I'll recommend Jacob stays with you, provided certain requirements are met. What requirements? Michael asked. First, legal paternity must be formalized. Second, Rebecca needs to start psychological treatment immediately. Third, we'll conduct monthly follow-up visits for the next 6 months. And after that, if all goes well, custody becomes permanent. The relief on their faces was visible. There's one more thing, Susan said. Rebecca, you need to understand you're making a major decision. You're choosing to share motherhood rather than fully transfer parental rights. I understand, and that's what I want. Are you sure? Because once this arrangement is official, it will be difficult to change. I'm sure Jacob deserves a complete family, and I deserve the chance to learn how to be a good mother. Very well. Let's start the paperwork. The bureaucratic process took the rest of the morning, but when they left the hospital, they were officially a family. In the car, the silence was broken by Jacob, who began babbling as if celebrating. I think he understands, said Rebecca, laughing through tears. Children always know, said Margaret. And now? Asked Michael. Now we go home, said Margaret. Our home. The months that followed brought equal measures of challenges and joys. Rebecca began psychological treatment and gradually grew more confident as a mother. Michael discovered that working from home was not only possible but also more productive, as he could better manage his time. Margaret flourished in her role as a full-time grandmother, rediscovering the joy of a house full of life and movement. Jacob grew surrounded by love and attention, developing a cheerful and curious personality that charmed everyone. The social worker's visits became increasingly spaced out and friendly. Susan often remarked that she rarely saw such a successful transition. You've proven that family isn't just about biology, she said during one of her last visits. It's about commitment and love. A year after the day Michael had shown up at his mother's door, they celebrated Jacob's first official birthday as a family. The party was simple, held in the backyard of the house that had since been renovated and expanded. Ruth was there, along with some neighbors who had become close friends and Michael's co-workers, who had been pleasantly surprised by the changes in his life. Who would have thought that grumpy man would turn into such a loving father, commented Jennifer, his former secretary, who now worked as his remote assistant. People change when they find something worth changing for, replied Rebecca, who was in her second semester of nursing school and had become a confident, determined young woman. What about you? Planning on more kids? Asked one of the neighbors. Rebecca and Michael exchanged a glance. It was a question they'd recently discussed. For now, we're focused on being the best parents we can be for Jacob, said Michael, but you never know what the future holds. What matters is that Jacob has a family who loves him, said Margaret, appearing with the birthday boy in her arms. And that's more than many children have. When it was time to sing Happy Birthday, Jacob stood on Michael's lap, with Rebecca and Margaret beside him. The photo Ruth took in that moment perfectly captured the genuine happiness on everyone's faces. Later, when the guests had left and Jacob was peacefully asleep in his crib, the three adults sat on the porch to talk. You know, said Michael, a year ago, if someone had told me I'd be here in this house with a family, I wouldn't have believed it. Why? Asked Rebecca. Because I thought success meant having total control over my life. I believed family commitments were obstacles. And now? Now I know control is an illusion. And that the best moments in life come when you stop trying to control everything and just let yourself love. Wise words, said Margaret. Learned from the best teacher. Michael took his mother's hand. Jacob has given us so many gifts, said Rebecca. But I think the greatest one was teaching us that family is something you choose to build every day. And that it's never too late to start over, added Margaret. When they finally stood to go inside, Michael paused at the door and looked back at the street where he'd grown up. The same street he'd once sworn never to set foot on again. Any regrets? Asked Rebecca, noticing his gaze. Just one, said Michael. What? That it took me so long to come home. But you did come back, said Margaret, and that's what matters. Yes, Michael smiled, listening to the soft sound of Jacob's breathing from the bedroom. I came back. And this time, it's for good. The end. So, what did you think of this story? Could you feel the emotion of this family reunited through love? Tell us in the comments how it was for you to follow this journey of Michael, Rebecca, and Margaret. And if you have any story of family reunions or second chances in your own life, share it with us. We love reading about your experiences. Don't forget to leave a like if the story touched your heart, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other heartwarming stories like this one.